Hello, everybody. Everybody, welcome to tonight's Truth Proof live stream. Got a great guest on tonight, as you saw by the title card. And first of all, I've got to thank everybody who gave to the super chat last week. I didn't get a chance to thank you, but I know Deborah Singleton did on the chat. She did thank everybody for that. So thanks again. It really, really helps us. And let's have a look. I'm going to see who is in tonight's stream and give a few mentions. We have, as I said, Deborah Singleton. She'll be moderating tonight. And so, be on your best behaviour, people, because you will get booted out if you start creating, as you all know. So let's have a look then. We've got Ralph Winter, Rebecca King, Joe Hayes, Blue Shift, as always, Codes of the Unknown, Alison Buttle, Tino is in the chat tonight, and Space Cadet Lottie, Stuart Farrington. Welcome all to tonight's stream. So without further ado, we will get into our running shoes and we will go with this. As I say, welcome all to tonight's live stream. And I've just got to mention, if anybody can hear any buzzing tonight, we've tried to eliminate it, but it seems that we haven't got it done in time for the stream. So I hope it doesn't put you off too much. So without me further going on, I will get Paul on to introduce his guest. Here we go.
Thank you very much, Les, and welcome everybody to tonight's live stream. And I think you're really going to enjoy what we're going to hear from Lee Nicholson, who I rate as an absolutely first-class researcher, a little bit unsung, if you ask me. And Lee, welcome to the live stream.
Thank you, Paul. Great to be here.
No, it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, you've sent me stuff over the years that I've read, and I've seen depth of research that what you go into it, it's over and above. It's as good as what anybody else is doing, and I think you deserve a little bit more recognition. And you sort of alluded to just before chat that you may be thinking of writing a book because you've got that much information in front of you.
Yeah,
you describe yourself a bit like myself as a multi-phenomena researcher. Do you want to tell people what that means?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it didn't take me very long in looking into this subject to discover that, where you get UFO sightings, you get other phenomena as well, and the whole range of phenomena, and not every time, but quite often.
Yeah. And where shall we start, Lee? Do you want to start with your early experiences during childhood and early family experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by talking about my dad, really, because I owe it to him that I'm interested in this in a way, and he has passed away now, unfortunately. But yeah, my dad was very interested in this subject all his life, and the reason for that is because when he was a lot younger, I think about 4 or 5, maybe 3 or 4 even, he was living in Hunnaby, which is an area you know well, and at that time he had this sort of classic bedroom visitation experience as a child, and it happened, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times, and he would wake up paralyzed, and he would have these beings in the room looking at him, and I seem to remember that there was quite a few. We're not just talking 3, but maybe 5 or 6, and he always said, funnily enough, that he thought of them as being giant slugs at the time because he was very small, and later on he recognized that they were actually hooded beings, sort of the classic grey type hooded beings. And he would, very much like you, Paul, again, he would when they sort of went away and he could move again, he'd run into his mum and dad's bedroom and tell them what happened, screaming and crying, and they would just dismiss it as a dream. But he felt sure it wasn't a dream. He felt there was a lot more to it than that. Yeah, so.
And it stuck with him all those years. He never found a rational for it. And I suppose, like yourself, he will have looked.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I mean, and the thing is as well, talking to his mum, to my grandma, she had a couple of encounters or experiences which we don't know much about, but they're just interesting anyway. So she told him of one event where she watched a large flower descend from the sky, and a fairy or a small person came out and talked to her. And that's all I have. But it's certainly intriguing, isn't it?
It
You know, and
is.
this is
Is this
possibly the
at Hunmanby?
20s.
Is this at Hunmanby as well?
I couldn't say for sure. No, it could well have been because that's where they lived at that time, but it may have been earlier. You know, maybe earlier in her life. And there was another event, which again it could have been Hunmanby, where, and this came from my uncle Peter, that they had an experience where a ball of light came down the chimney, flew around the house, and exited the window. And as he said, well, that weren't ball lightning, were it?
No.
You know.
Yeah, I remember you sending me some information on that. It's amazing amount of information that I've read that you've sent me over years. And do you know, or have you got any knowledge that other people experienced anything in Hunmanby? As you know,
No.
this little place interests me, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, I don't, Paul. No, I mean, he moved away so young, and so I've actually been there a couple of times to visit, but I don't have any direct relatives or anything there. You know, my grandparents are actually buried there, though. So,
Okay.
no, I don't know.
So, shall we move on to some experiences of your own, maybe from childhood?
Yeah, well, so what? Probably the next thing to just mention is that my dad moved to Erie, which is one of the little towns near where I am here, and he met my mum, and then they moved to Barton Olswick. It was about 1969, and then funnily enough, that was the first UFO sighting my mum ever had. Was after she met my dad. Now, he didn't see this, but she saw, I think she said 7 bluey green cigar-shaped objects just slowly trekking across the sky. And again, it's one of those. It's not very easy to explain such a big grouping and such an unusual shape and color. You know.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. And then it would have been. I was born in 1975, and I should just say as well that I live in a town called Barton Olswick, which is in Finland. And it's just a small town. It's about 10,000 people here. But I've got quite a lot of reports from this area. I have about 25 separate reports from this area, from this town, going back to 1977 is the earliest one. Sorry, it's not, is it? Because my mum's would be the earliest one. So, but anyway, and this area I've discovered is a very much a hotbed of activity. So, in this direction, we have Pendle Hill, which a lot of people have heard about, and I know you've had Craig Bryant on talking about Pendle Hill, and there's a lot of UFO sightings from Pendle Hill. But the other, on this side, what we have is Carlton Moor, which again you've had Philip Mantle on talking about Carlton Moor.
Yeah.
A huge amount of sightings in the 80s, all the way, you know. And so this is quite an active area. And so I think the first experience I was involved with, and I can't remember it if I'm honest, I was probably only been about 4 or 5, but my dad always told this one, where we all went out to the garden and we watched a lot, very large, he said, very large orange disc or saucer-shaped craft slowly track along the sky. And a couple of minutes later, the second one followed it, and there were no direction changes or anything, but you know, you felt they were very unusual. And he always made me laugh that he always said it reminded him of the Starship Enterprise because he felt there was a little bit of a tail or something at the back.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting little detail.
Is this the 1983 one?
No, this would have been probably more like 79. I was born in 75, so yeah, about 79. Yeah, so if we move on to that, this would be my first sighting that I can vaguely remember. And to set the scene, you know, this 83, so we used to play out in the fields as kids. I mean, that's what we did. And so it was later in the year, for sure, because it was dark. And it was just out the back here. We were all playing around. It was me and a couple of lads and a girl, and I was toy fighting with a lad who was a bit older than me. Michael, he was called. And it was one of these moments where, if you know the toy fighting thing, you're just basically wrestling, aren't you? Trying to pin them down. And so, you know, we were doing that. And I'd managed to pin him down. And the trick was you could get your knees onto their arms and then they wouldn't be able to move. And I was just getting him into this position. I'm thinking, hey, I'm stronger than this big lad here. You know what I mean? And then he just stopped. He's totally stopped resisting. I'm wondering what's going on. And he basically, it was the it's behind you moment. And he may have sworn, I don't know, but what's that? And as I sort of looked round, I can't really remember seeing anything, to be honest with you, but what he said and what the others said is that an object like a star had come along slowly, had stopped more or less where we were, and just at the point when I had gone to turn around, it just zipped away at high speed. Which again, especially at that time, we don't have aircraft that are, you know, capable of hovering and then zipping away at high speed like that.
Well, and silent, I'm assuming, because you'd have
silent, yes, not a sound.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these reports were silent. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Is there any more from childhood, or?
No, I think that's about it, really.
Yeah.
So for me, that was about it. I mean, the interest was there, but it wasn't passionate, you know. But it was there. It wasn't until about '91 when I picked up one of my dad's old books, and it was a book about it was the Welsh Triangle. So it's about the Broadhaven incidents and all that, and it just set me afire. Did that book? I couldn't.
Is this the Peter Paget book?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, I've got the book. I've got to confess, I haven't read it. Not
right.
Probably
It'll be
great.
dated now.
Yeah,
It'll be
right.
quite dated now, but there was quite a lot of interesting stuff going on in that area at the time. But it was my introduction to reading about the phenomenon. It just set me on fire. And at that point, I started just chasing the references in the back. And at that time, we used to go to the library because, you know, it was pre-internet. I didn't have the internet anyway. So we used to go to the library, order books, get the books, read those, get the references, order the other books. And, you know, and that was how my journey began. Yeah.
Well, you know, like you said, you've researched quite a few cases local to you. Have you found any that other people haven't found?
I mean, yeah. The Ford family one, which we will come to, it was covered. It was covered by Tony Dodd. Who did investigate that, and there was another local researcher investigate that, and another couple of others, but nobody's really written anything about it. I know Tony Dodd mentioned it very briefly in his book.
Okay.
Aspects of it. Yeah.
So you refer to these things as EPEs, anomalous personal experiences.
Yeah, that's the term I chose at the time. Yeah.
That's a brilliant term. It encompasses it, doesn't it, really, Lee? And because that's what they are. And
very personal, a lot of them.
Yeah, they're deeply personal to people involved, aren't they? You know, and that's why it's so devastating when something's happened and you do confide in somebody, or you do start talking about it and you get laughed at. It's a difficult one, just balancing everything out, isn't it? So, do you want to move on to the Ford family?
Yeah, we can do. Yeah. So this was a set of experiences that happened to a family. Sorry, I've got a little reference note here.
It's okay.
In Barnoldswick, and it was almost coincidental because I just developed this passionate interest for this subject in '91, and this happened. It was at the end of '94, so it was just a few years later, and it was such a profound case that it was incredible. It was literally 5 minutes up the road from where I am now. So what happened was the family. It was a local builder called Mel Ford, and it was a Sunday. And they have the usual thing. So they have two sons, John and Andrew, and they were all up there having a family meal. They also had the girlfriends there as well. So it's six witnesses.
6 witnesses.
Yeah, and one somebody, I don't know who it was, noticed these two orange lights, just like what you see up at Benton.
Yeah.
And it attracted their attention. So they all started to look, and it got to the point where they all went outside and watched this thing. And these lights were moving around and disappearing. And apparently they disappeared. And then they were replaced by two larger objects, which were offset at an angle like that. And as they watched, there was a movement of motion like this, and then sort of a wobbling, and then the two came together. That was one of the dramatic aspects of it. Then the whole thing disappeared, and it reappeared somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Ford, Helen, she observed a smaller orange sphere as well at the same time, quite close to the house. It happened for about 15 minutes, all of this. They were all watching. They actually took 5 photographs, but they didn't come out, unfortunately. I think maybe the porch light obscured the photography, or the focus was off. But I've seen the pictures, but they're just blurry.
Yeah.
And that's how it began. That was on the 24th of December in 1994. It was the first incident. And, you know, it obviously had quite an effect on them, but I don't think they really expected anything else to happen after that. But what did happen is that John, the eldest son, started to experience things in his room. And the first thing was he woke up one night. I'm not sure if he was paralyzed or not at this particular time, but he was terrified anyway, and he just felt there was a presence in his room watching him, close to him. This was a couple of weeks after, if that.
Right.
He thought nothing of it. Couple more, another week or so went by, and it happened again. And this time he was paralyzed. He couldn't move. He was sure there was someone looking at him, but I don't think he could even open his eyes. But he did. He said that he had a sense of a bright light, actually on his face. So, and this particular night, when it subsided, he went into his mum and dad's room. And I mean, he would have been probably 18, 20 maybe at the time. He wasn't a young kid, you know.
Yeah.
Terrified, refusing to sleep in his room. And he brought his pillow in to show his parents that it was soaking wet. He's been sweating so much. It was actually,
In
you know, as Mel said, yeah, I assume so. As Mel said to me, you know, you could wring it out, you know. But it makes you wonder if he'd been there subjected to this paralysis for a certain amount of time, perhaps, to produce so much sweat into the pillow.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a pint or so is what Mel said, you know, which obviously we don't know. But the interesting thing about that was that at that time nobody else had experienced anything, and Mel was kind of skeptical.
So had he connected his son's experience with the lights? I don't suppose he had at that time, had he?
Not at that time, no. And bearing in mind as well, the whole family had no interest or prior knowledge about this subject at all. Nothing, you know, no interest anyway. And so, yeah, Mel's quote to me was, "He's going nuts, he's young." This is what he said to his wife. Anyway, so another few more weeks go by, and it happens to Mel. He wakes up middle of the night. It was 3 a.m. actually. I've got the date here somewhere, but yeah, this was April '95.
Okay.
3 a.m. So he wakes up and he can't move. He's paralyzed, but he can open his eyes. He opens his eyes, and he said it's absolutely black. And this was a little bit unusual because they do have a street light close by, and you do get this ambient light. We all wake up in the middle of the night, and your eyes adjust to the darkness. You can see the shapes in the room and things like that. But it was absolutely black. There was nothing visible at all, apart from two what he described as orangey red eyes, and he said about the size of a 10-pence piece, about 3 foot off the floor and about 2 foot from his face. He couldn't move, and he sort of proceeded to try and call his wife as best he could, you know, to make a sound. And she did hear him, and she moved. She turned the light on, and then there was nothing. That was that. And that's how he remembered it. But what they did notice is that the Teasmade, the clock that they had at the time, which was a Teasmade, had stopped at 3 a.m. and never worked again, which is something we hear of quite a lot, you know, this electrical interference effect. Yeah.
And there's sort of similarities, well, hence the word multi-phenomena, to the things that happened at Hummonby, you know, the slow build-up of activity. Had the penny dropped at this stage then with the orange lights? Or was obviously?
I think this was the beginning of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, just 1 second, Lee. Anybody in the chat who's got any questions for Lee, could you put them in capital letters, please? Deborah's probably already mentioned it, but I've missed it. So if you would, please, and then Les can pick them up. Right. Okay, Lee. Sorry. Fire away.
That's all right. So, yeah, and I should say there was an additional to this experience for Mel, is that he woke up in the morning and he had a lump above his ear. It was quite sore. It wasn't there when he went to sleep. It was quite sure, and it was quite sore. And he sort of picked at it and messed with it. He actually pulled a little sphere out of his head. Now, I never saw this. There was another researcher called Simon Whitehead who was involved at the time, and he was working with Tony Dodd. They both had a look at it, and Simon told me that he looked at it under the microscope, and when he put some fluid on it, it split in half, and it looked like it had cells inside. But I have asked him since, and he just doesn't have any more to add to it. I spoke to him recently. But I know Tony Dodd then had it, and he sent it off to America for analysis, and the story that came back there was, it's never been written about, and I've never seen the lab reports or anything, but just that it was a piece of wood, which Mel was very, unconvinced about. So what happened there, I don't know. Whether You know, whether he misidentified it and everybody did, or whether the object got lost or switched, or I've no idea.
Or whether it was quite simply a lump of wood, or
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
because we can't attribute everything to the phenomena, can we?
No,
So,
no, you have to be careful.
So how does it start to develop from there?
Yeah. Okay. So moving on from there, there was a few more sightings, and one of the things that I've grouped together in here was a poltergeist effect, which began
Right.
happening in the house, and there were several of these. So they used to get the letterbox flapping, but nobody there, and Helen, when she was at home during the day, would hear her voice called and things like that. And this had never happened before, but it started happening after this, and amongst all this activity. They had an ornamental mask on the television, just like we all do, an ornament at the side of the TV. And I think the first thing they noticed about that, they came down, it was on the floor, but it was a bit too far away from where it was for it to have just fallen off.
Yeah.
Well, Mel told me, he said, I didn't think anything of it, and then it happened again. So he said, I left it there. And when everybody came home, he asked everyone, I didn't anybody knocked it off, and nobody knew anything about it. Again, I don't know if they were necessarily connecting the dots here straight away, but it happened again. And then the final time, it happened right in front of Helen and Mel. They both saw it happen. And he said, as he said, that bloody thing just looped off.
Yeah.
It just literally jumped off on its own, which is incredible. And then there was another incident which was in the bedroom. They were both in the bedroom, and they did have a dog at the time. And he said they had a set of suitcases squeezed in the side of the wardrobe next to the wall, as you do, get them out of the way, really quite jammed in there. And again, middle of the night, no rhyme, no reason, suitcase came flying, and he said came flying out. It didn't just slowly tumble out, it came flying out onto the floor. The dog went crazy. And there were quite a lot of this stuff going on, which is really fascinating. It's very similar to the Hunnaby thing, where they had the coins going, and
Yeah.
yeah. There was another incident
Do you
where he had a garage attached to his house, and he'd gone into, because he was a builder, and he'd gone into the garage, and he had a tin of creosote. He said it looked like it had been expanded, but there was no leak. But there was creosote on the floor around it, but there was no leak in the tin, no footprints or anything either. It was very strange.
Yeah, and do you think, Lee, this poltergeist type activity, do you think it was the phenomena connected to the lights, or do you think it's just when these kind of things happen, everybody's emotions are on an altered state, and you're inviting other things to happen, or inadvertently, you're probably not even aware, but you're aware that something's happening, so you're on constant sort of tense alert, and it's a snowball effect, or do you think that these were separate items?
I don't know. I think it's related, but how, I don't know. That's the question. I mean, there are possibilities. So this is one possibility that this kind of experience opens up some latent potential that we have.
Yeah.
A telekinetic potential or something that's happening spontaneously without people realizing it. That might be a part of it. It may be something else. It may be that some other force is sort of unleashed in relation to these phenomena. As far as we know, I don't have an answer.
Before we move on, as this case develops, how did it affect Mel at this stage? I mean, and how has it affected him throughout his life? I mean, you can probably fit that in as you move along anyway, but he must have realised now.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And because what happened was, I heard about this probably a couple of months into it, because he was a friend of my mum and dad's, and I went round and spent several evenings out, hours and hours at a time round there. And what he said to me was that it was 6 months of hell, is how he described it. Yeah. And I mean, I told you about the blackness. Well, that happened on a different occasion, where again, he woke up. I don't know if he was actually paralyzed, but he woke up in the middle of the night, and he saw a cloud of blackness come in through the window. And when it filled the room and it went black, that's when he became paralyzed. And he told me this, he struggled out of it. He managed, so it's a little bit like sleep paralysis in a sense, but he visually saw something come in. He struggled out of it, put the light on, had a cigarette, calmed himself down, put the light off, and it happened again. And he put the light on, calmed himself down, and it happened again for a third time. And he told me, he said, I just stayed up the whole night and I smoked a full packet of cigarettes. Just did not
Yeah,
go to
because
sleep.
as you've said, there's a light source, an ambient light coming into the room, so he would have seen this blackness. So do you think that when he woke up and everything were black, and when his son woke up and everything were black, it was due to that which he later experienced, this blackness coming into the room?
Yeah, I think it's something to do with the phenomenon somehow. I mean, I only know of one case similar, which is Elsie Hawkinson. And I can't remember the year, but it's quite an old case. It was an old lady. She was driving along the road. She saw a UFO hovering above the road, and as her car approached it and went underneath it, she was enveloped in blackness, and she had a missing time experience.
Okay.
That's another one I know that has this black. Usually it's a light, isn't it? A blue light, or you know.
And is this in the same area?
No, I think it was down south, the Elsie Hawkinson case.
Okay. It's still interesting though that there's comparisons to it.
Yeah, it's the only one I'm aware of where there was a black light. I mean, I'm sure there are more, but you know. But yeah, the point is that you asked how it affected him, and so after this experience, I know for years he wouldn't sleep in the with the light on. Yeah, he slept with the light on every night because he was terrified essentially.
And how old would he have been at this time? Because his son's are 20s. You said late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, he'd have been probably in his 50s.
Yeah,
in his 50s, I would have thought. Yeah,
and
it's highly unusual.
Was it something he kept to himself, or did he share it with work colleagues and friends?
After it started happening, he became almost he had to tell everyone and anyone who would listen. It was a bit of an obsession for him. He wanted to know what was happening. He had to tell everyone and anyone. But I sat with him for hours and hours at a time, and he would in the story, and for hours and hours we'd go over the same story, and then we'd go on to something else, and we'd come back and go over it, and it never slipped anything up. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind it was a genuine experiences that this family were having.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Just before we sort of get a little bit further into it, jumping back to the lights, didn't you say that potentially the damage to stone wall? Have I got that right?
Yeah, that was part of it. Yeah, but again, I never verified it. I was quite young at the time, and just getting into the subject. And I just recently spoke to someone today who knows this farmer actually. So if I get a chance, I will ask him.
Yeah.
Yes, this was the very first experience. These orbs were manoeuvring over this field, and the next day, Mel told me that it looked like the dry stone wall had been brought down on there.
Right. Okay. So, well, like you said, we're never going to know, are we? It could have just been weather damage, but it's interesting because they noted it. So, where do you want to move on with this then, Lee?
Well, another one. There's a few really significant experiences, but one of the most interesting ones to me happened. It was September in '95, and it was on a Saturday morning. This, and Mel Ford it was about 10 o'clock in the morning. He got up. He was just relaxing. He said it was a beautiful day. I don't think he even had the TV on. He was just sat in his chair relaxing. His wife Helen was in the kitchen. She was doing the washing up, and his son. So there's two sons, and one of them moved out. So I think Andrew was the one in the house at the time. And what he said he experienced was he just looked round, and then all of a sudden he saw this blue. I'd say light, but it was an even line of blue all around the room on the walls. And as he watched, it filled up. It rose up the walls, and he said it was just like the room had been filled with water.
Right.
The whole room filled up blue. Right to the ceiling, and he just sat and watched this happen. No paralysis, as far as I know. And then it slowly emptied out, and that's how he phrased it. It emptied out.
And did it dilute all items in the room as well, so they looked blue?
I can only assume so. He specifically said the wall, but he said the room filled up blue. So I can only assume it must have affected everything visually. But what really intrigued me is that was Mel's experience. It slowly filled up and it emptied out. But his wife, Helen, immediately came in from the kitchen and said, "Have you just seen the lightning?" And he said, "Lightning?" He said, "It's a beautiful day out there." She said, "Well, I've just had two blue beams of light come in through the kitchen window. Tubes of light coming through the window. And then his son Andrew came out of the bedroom and said he'd experienced a quick flash of bright blue light in his room as well. So they'd all experienced some kind of blue light phenomenon, but for each of them, it seemed to have a different time effect, if you will, which I found very interesting. It hints at a possibility of some missing time or something happening that they're not remembering or not aware of, which, as we know, is quite common, in this subject.
Do you know what's interesting is all of this that were happening? Obviously, it's a good distance away. Is the time when things were most active here for me and our family in Bridlington, and the guy over the road, Peter, who used to sit. He had lung problems, so he didn't go to bed. He'd sit up most at night. It was more comfortable for him. Probably smoking, which wouldn't have done him much good, but what can we do? But he came across early one morning. It's quite a big house, and there's big double bay windows and everything. And he said, I nearly come over at night. He said, I thought there was something wrong in your property. I said, what do you mean? He said, there were blue lights flashing inside. Sort of behind the curtains, it were lighting up blue. On the landings, it were lighting up blue. It just sort of sprung to mind when you said that. This were in the night time, though, not in this experience that your witness Melvin talks about were in the daytime, weren't it?
Yeah.
But he likened it to like blue lightning. But it's interesting. I wrote about it in Night People, so I'm not saying it's anything like the same. But this one these things happened between 94 and 97, 98.
Yeah, it's a bit amazing, isn't it? The same time period as things were beginning on the Skinwalker Ranch as well.
Strange that, isn't it? Yeah. So where do we go from his other experiences then, Lee?
Well, there's quite a few. Again, we're not going to try and cover everyone because we've covered a lot of the most dramatic ones. But I think one of the other interesting factors here, which just running down this list, was in November of the same year. And this involved Helen, Mel's wife. At the house one morning, opened the back door, and she just found, 2 dead mice. So, what's that? But they were a little bit unusual, she thought. There were 2 of them, and they were both parallel, lined up together, facing the same direction. But she thought nothing of it, and I think she told Mel, and he just got them on a shovel and threw them out into over the wall, as you do, But it happened again the day after. 2 more. Again, perfectly lined up. Now, they didn't study them closely or anything, and they thought nothing of it. And he wasn't aware of anything, that it was even connected at all, until somebody pointed it out to him. And he told me this. I think there was some researchers went to visit him, and they just mentioned about animal mutilations, and he said he just looked at Helen like that. And they said, well, we had these mice. Well, the interesting thing about that is that about the same time, Tony Dodd's working on the Jason Andrews case.
That's what sprung to mind, yeah.
Yeah, and in that case, in the book, there is a photograph, and they found 4 dead mice, and there's a picture of them, and they were all exactly the same. So there were all 4 of them, all lined up in a row, same direction. And apparently, these ones, you can't see in the photograph, it's very blurry, but apparently these ones had a hole in the head and a hole in the rectum as well, which is very reminiscent of the animal mutilation phenomenon, should we say. Yeah.
And what did you talk about a robin that were found as well?
There was a robin, yeah. He actually had that in his freezer for a while. So, but again, we couldn't, I can't go any further with that. He said he'd found a robin in the garden. This would have been maybe 6 months later, and quite a large area of flattened grass around it. But again, he wasn't claiming anything. It was just, is this of interest? Is this relevant? I've kept it. I think he was asked to keep it actually.
Yeah.
But they never came and picked it up at the time.
So
at that time.
Well, I don't know. We can probably go back to the Ford family if you want, in 30 minutes or so. Do you want to tell anybody about we'll call it your mild experience at Benton, because it weren't really impacting, but I know you've visited a few times, haven't you, Lee?
Yeah, I've been up 3 times at night now, and a few times during the day as well. The last time we went, it was just a few weeks ago. I can't remember the date, to be honest, but we had it. It was a very minor experience, but it was interesting in that I don't have an easy explanation for it. And we pulled up at the car park. We were stopping in Scarborough. We'd had a meal, and so we decided just to spur of the moment, really, let's go and have an hour over at Benton before the end of the night. So we did that, and just as we pulled into the car park, we got all the stuff together. It was 10 to, and it was actually 5 to 11 when we had this minor experience. And we were, for anyone that's been there and knows the area, we were walking down the path, which straight to this, you're facing the sea, you're approaching whether you turn left or right to follow the coastal paths. And we got partway down there, and I just saw in the sky was a flash of orange light, but it was fast. It was like that, it was a second or probably less than a second, but it was an area of sky, I would say, at least twice the size of the moon. And what it was cloudy. It was a cloudy night, and it was like an orange flash behind the clouds. And it was just the size of it and the speed of it that just, to me, I'm struggling to get an explanation. Could have been a flare or something like that, but it just seemed to be too quick, Yeah. And ironically and annoyingly, my business partner Vicky, her fiance, she was looking through the Psionics night vision camera at the time. She saw it through the camera, but she wasn't recording. So
that's the case. That happens, doesn't it?
And to her, if for anyone who's used a Psionics, they do alter the colours a little bit because you're looking in the infrared spectrum. It looked more red. It was very orange to me, and it looked more red to her. But she saw it more of something that was under the clouds and illuminated the bottom of the clouds.
Yeah. I mean, just to stick with psionics for a moment, they are good because they can see where normal cameras aren't going to see, and for price, they're excellent value. But they do distort. I've noticed that they distort the colours, don't they? But
you've got colour night vision, isn't it? But they are a full spectrum camera, so you potentially seeing it's probably true colour, but it's not the way we see it.
No. Okay. So where do you want to go now? Oh, just before we move on, last week we spoke with Ben Walgate, and Ben talked about a sighting of something he called the Glimmer Man, almost transparent, a bit like Predator. I don't know if you've covered out like that, Lee, but I'll just touch on it for a moment because I bumped into somebody, well, during the week after we'd spoke to Ben, and he says he was watching live stream and he felt kind of vindicated. I'll not say his name, but he told me about this thing. He were working on a building at the back of Christchurch in Bridlington. I think they call it the Key Centre. Well, they call it the Key Centre. And he'd been doing some work on this spot. It was nearly done, and it's big building to sort of work on. He sort of went outside, daytime, stepped away, looking towards car park and building, sort of proud of what he'd been doing. Maybe sunny day, steel railings all going down the side of this place. I don't know, I think they call it a 10-foot. There's a little passage down back of it. You could drive a car down single file. Sunny day, and he becomes aware of what he thought looked like a mirage, like a shape off the ground. And it's similar to what Ben was describing other day, but this weren't a person or anything. It was just a wobbly, translucent shape. And he's watching it, and he said it just slowly moved down the fence. Now, he told me about it because he knows my interest in unexplained, but he's not told many people. So when Ben mentioned that the other week, obviously Ben's description must have echoed something for this guy. I nearly said his name then, for this guy. So I'm interested if anybody else has got any reports of things like this. I mean, I know there's a lady on social media who were in an hunting stand who saw something like this in America, and I spoke to her about it. Have you come across anything like that?
Not personally, not locally, but yeah, in the research, in the literature, yeah. The skinwalkers, they had it there. It's Bruce Maccabee's wife, that, isn't it?
That's Jan Maccabee, yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And more and more. Thank you. More and more people are reporting these things. I wonder if it's a new phenomena or whether it's people are just being bold enough to report it, because it's one thing saying I've seen this UFO, it was this shaped, or I've seen this sphere of orange light, but this translucent shape of something is a bit of a weird one. It's vague. It's more vague than the UFO, the unexplained phenomena, isn't it?
Yeah.
So where do you want to go? Sorry, Lee.
It speaks of cloaking, doesn't it? You know, it's a cloaking
Yes.
effect, and the light is being bent around, and that's why it looks miragey and distorted.
Yeah.
Well, it reminded me of one little side story of the Ford family again, which was one of the minor events that happened. Was that one morning, I think they used to work together, Mel and John, his eldest son. So they're getting ready, they're having some breakfast, and he said, Mel, he was just eating his breakfast, and he saw a shadow go along the wall in the living room. He said it either went along the wall or through it. He couldn't tell. He didn't say anything, but he noticed his son went like that, and he said he thought I'll hold quiet here and I'll ask him what he saw, and he said he saw a shadow go either along the wall or through it. So now you got two people seeing that, and I know this is what people talk about shadow beings and things like that, but does it make you wonder? Was there something not visible that cast a shadow?
Yeah. Got you. Yeah. But it's a good way of looking at it. And was this in their property or on a property they were working on?
No, it's their property, the same house.
Right. And do we know if that property's still being affected?
No, I haven't spoke. Mel's passed away now, and I haven't spoken to Helen
Okay.
for a lot of years. I'm hoping to get in touch with her actually.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm going to write the book, because there's a few things that she could help me out with as well. So
It sounds like
if there's an update, I'll let you know.
yeah, that would be wonderful. And before we move on, we'll see if Les has got any questions for us. I'm sure we have, and thank you very much for putting them in capital letters.
Yes, a great show up to now, guys. Thanks a lot, and everybody in the chat seems to be enjoying what they're hearing tonight. So I got a question from Kim Smith, and Kim is asking to Lee and Paul, people who are experiencers seem to be more paranormal stroke psychic, but which came first? Is it the contact made? Is contact made because these people are open, or does it open people up?
Well, I'll attempt to answer it, and then let's see what Lee's got to say. I think that people who've never personally had an experience, there are people who are open to it. Obviously, that we had a doubt, but people who've never had an experience suddenly become, I don't know, more, we'll call it psychically aware or more receptive to things that are happening. And I don't think we're suddenly being sprinkled by some kind of exotic science. I think it's all to do with what's going off in here. Once you know this subject is real, then you're looking for signs. I'm not looking up at sky and seeing a satellite and thinking it's a spaceship, but you're becoming more aware. And I think there's a mixture of both there. But over to you, Lee. What do you think?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, there's been some studies done recently by some brilliant people. Dr. Kit Green is a former CIA doctor, and Dr. Gary Nolan, who is another top geneticist, is Gary Nolan. But this information is just coming out, and it's in a few books here and there, and they've done a couple of little interviews, but not a lot. But they've been studying experiences, and they've got a group of about 100, and they've been studying them. I mean, it's kind of part of the OSAP program, this, so it was military funded work. But they were doing everything, MRIs and blood tests and everything. And what they've discovered apparently is that not all of them, but the vast majority of these experiences have a difference in the brain. And it's the cardiopatanium. I mean, I'm not a brain neurologist by any stretch of the imagination, but it's this section of the brain, the cardio and the paternum, I think it is, which is essentially alike. It's got more neural connections there than is normal. And they've also taken study groups and compared, and they're seeing a vast difference. And they're comparing it to an antenna.
Right.
And they're suggesting, well, they're not suggesting, they're wondering, because it's very scientific, and this paper's going for peer review apparently. But they're wondering, is this what's attracting the phenomenon, or to these specific individuals like the Ford family where they're having repeat experiences, or has the phenomenon caused a change in the brain? They don't really know.
It's all speculation, but it's good. And I noted that you said that one military funded.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it? Because we've got official bodies who one faction, this stuff doesn't exist. It's all nonsense, and we've got military-funded studies, which I know I'm not preaching something new here, but it is kind of interesting. One smacks in face at other, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Les, are we more?
Yes, we've got another question. It's from Lee Roscoe. Yeah, and he's saying, "Hello, Lee. Can you tell us about what you're working on here and now?" I presume he means books, research, this type of thing. And he also says, "Thanks for your time tonight."
Yeah. So I am toying with the idea of putting a book together because I've got quite a lot of reports from this area now, and as I say, the Ford family, we haven't covered it all yet, but there's a lot of interesting, important stuff there. But at the moment, probably the current thing is to do a bit more of a in-depth article on the Tubman and calf mutilation, which we'll probably talk about that as well tonight.
Yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, when we get through these questions, we'll move on to that then. But yeah.
Yeah, other than that, I've been working on an interview with David Caton for about 6 months, which is still a long way from completing actually, but that's in the pipeline.
Yeah.
And I've got a few other articles and things as well.
Okay.
Yeah, great stuff there, Lee. Lee Muzz73 is asking, Lee, what do military know about UFO stroke aliens on Earth? Nothing, number one, or two, something, or three, everything.
Well, I think it depends who you mean by the military, because I think a lot of them don't know anything, but I do think that an element do, and I mean this is all coming to a head in America right now. I don't know if you're aware of this, but with the Elizondo and the ATIP program, and there's just a new book come out. It's the Skinwalkers at the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And one of the authors of this book is Jim Lukatsky, a guy called Jim Lukatsky, who he was the program manager for the Defense Intelligence Agency. And so this book's been cleared for release. And there you had a 22 million study, 2 years they had at it. And really interestingly, they, Paul, were looking at what they call human effects, which is what we will call the multi-phenomenon side of things. But they call it human effects. And that this included dogmen type encounters by people's families who had been out on the ranch and things like that. So this we know went on, but there's a little gem in that book which not many people seem to have noticed yet, and that is that when this program was closing down, the researchers there, they're all very well connected with security clearances and the like, and they were trying to get the program into a different agency, because the Defense Intelligence Agency had a lot of religious people who didn't like it, and they had a lot of people who were concerned about being embarrassed, so they wanted to close it down. So they went to the Department of Homeland Security, because, funnily enough, they'd actually run into a couple of Homeland Security agents on a case they were investigating, or at least they identified it as one of their cars from the registration plate. They were investigating as well. Anyway, so they had several meetings, and just to get to the point here, they named two of the people who went away from the agency to two different intelligence agencies looking for evidence of recovered hardware, exotic technology.
Yeah.
And they were told, no and hell no, you're not allowed to know. But they came away with the feeling it was there, and it was there in the hands of aerospace contractors with government supervision.
Interesting as well that once again jump into the 22 million spent on something that's of no interest, no defense significance, no, do you know what I mean? It's very telling. It really is, isn't it? That there's all this money invested, there's all these black projects, and still the public raises their eyebrows and sort of smiles when talk of this kind of phenomena is opened up, So, Les, more questions, please.
Yeah, sure. Teresa Walker is asking, could Glimmer Man be government, number one, or number two, military technology?
Well, let Lee go with what he thinks. I think it could be. Because once again, all we're doing is speculating on what we think it could be. And if we
Yeah.
just accept that it's happening because there's too many independent witnesses, independent from one another, reporting this kind of thing, there's got to be some truth to it. You know, let's not just say what it is. Let's just assume it's real first. What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, yeah, similar. You know, it's easy to say, could it be military? And we sort of know they're trying the best to achieve this kind of technology, the likes of DARPA and the rest. But have they got there? And if they have, are they deploying it in, you know, York or wherever? You know,
It's a good point. You know, just briefly, when we talk about 1990s and this kind of decade of the triangles, I would have called it the black triangles. We know they've probably been seen before 90s and was seen after. But if this is something of ours that people report as big as a football pitch in some instances, or whatever, big as a battleship, 1994. Why aren't we using it now to settle conflicts? Why are we not seeing that technology now? If we've got something so big that could just sit above us silently, that sort of part of it tells or suggests to me that it might not have been our own. But I know that weren't the question.
I do agree, though.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a question from Kim Smith, and Kim is asking, Lee, mention the. Now, there's something here I can't pronounce. Maybe Paul can pick it up in the stream. I don't know. It's Mabinogion.
Nogion.
No need. He's got it. Lee's got it.
You got it. I was hoping somebody was going to deal me a good card there.
Well, I think I've spoken to Kim. I think she might have been the one who told me about this, actually. It's an Irish text, the Mabinogion. It's an ancient Irish text. There's one story in it, or there's one aspect of one of the stories in it, which is it sounds like a animal mutilation. I haven't got it in front of me now, to be honest with you, but it's worth looking up. It's very interesting because this is from 12th century.
I don't want to put you on the spot with it. Like you said, you've not got and I know you like detail, but do you want to give us broad brushstrokes of it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a sort of the story which involves, he's like a giant, you know, if you will. But anyway, the element of it is he's offended. One of the guys is offended, and he's to repay the debt, if you will. He says, I will mutilate your horses. And it says he took the horses and he cut their ears back to their skulls, and he cut their lips off, and he cut their tails off. And it's like, well, this is exactly what happened up at Tomaden, isn't it, with the Tomaden car?
Yeah, it's strikingly similar picture that is painting to animal mutilation. And
yeah, so it makes you wonder whether, I don't know if the story, you know, it doesn't sound like an account, the story, but it makes you wonder if that's how the information got into that story, because they were experiencing things like that.
Yeah, I'll tell you an interesting one. I don't know whether you've experienced or come across anything like this, but probably last year, a guy in Benton found a deer. He contacted me and he'd found the carcass of a deer. I got pictures of it. It had its genital area removed. It had had its ears removed, or one ear removed, the other one cut in half. But what's interesting, he removed it from where he'd found it and took it into his garden. So this is this week. So he might, I don't think he's in chat, but he were other week. And he sent me a picture this week because I took the pictures on his grass of this animal. The pictures this week of his grass are where this carcass was laid, and it actually looks the shape of it. And the grass is lush and green, and everything's just sort of dying back to winter around it. And he only sent me the pictures a few days ago. So
that's interesting, isn't it?
Make of that what you will. You know, it's just a strange one that he sent me. Obviously, we didn't stick a Geiger counter on the deer. We didn't do anything. Well, we had one, or I have one. Chris Turner's got it at the moment, and it would have been probably worth doing to see whether there were any radiation or any kind of electrically disturbance by, you know, tri-field meters or anything. I don't know whether they would, but interesting. We didn't do it. We can all say this after the effect, can't we? So jumping to it, Les, have we more questions?
Yeah, another one from Kim Smith, and Kim is saying, fascinating. Any link with migraines, Lee? Any link with migraines?
Well, I mean, I know a lot of experiences do suffer from migraines, but really, I mean, other than that, what can you say?
No, no, can't add to it.
Yeah, that's it for now, guys. If you want to.
Okay, then. So, do you want to move on to the Todmorden calf then, Liam? Let's talk about that for a while.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, there's probably maybe just a couple, maybe two little aspects of the Ford family case, which are probably worth getting out there.
Yeah, please do, yeah.
Before we leave that behind. So the other one, which to me is quite profound, was pretty much a year after the first incident. It was on the 3rd of December, and this was in 1995. And Mel, he'd been out for drinks. It would have been a Friday night, I think. And so people automatically say, well, he'd had a drink, but well, I don't think so. So he'd been out for a drink, and he was walking home. And where he lives, he's sort of on the outskirts of town, and there's a lane. He lives on a lane called Ben Lane. So you're walking down a main road, which is quite well lit, and he reached the point just before he got to the junction with Ben Lane, and there's a bus stop there. So I know that's exactly where he was at the time, and he saw something in front of him, and he said it was a small being. It was about 3.5 foot tall. It was hooded. It had big black eyes and a pointed chin, and the detail as well. He said it had its hands inside its sleeves, if you will. So you couldn't see any hands or any feet. It looked to him as though it was carrying something. It seemed to have a bit of a bulk there in front of him. And he said this thing looked at him, and he made it very clear it was stood on the grass, because there's a little mound of grass and a bench there and a pavement that goes around, but it was on the grass, not the pavement. I did send a drawing to you.
Yeah.
I actually drew it on the pavement, but that was my mistake. But not only that, because this thing looked at him, he said, and he said his comment was, you don't get any reaction, you can't read any emotions off something like that. It just looked at him, and he thought, get ready to run. He was thinking about running backwards, but he said it went round the corner before him, and it didn't move like something straight. He said it seemed to have a strange walk, which I've heard before.
Yeah,
people often seem to say that these beings either float and glide, or they don't walk very well, or a little bit bow-legged or something like that. Yeah. Make of it what you will. But another little aspect to this one was that at the same time, a tall woman, walked past him, and I think it was just before he saw the little entity, actually. He just saw her in the corner of his eye and just sort of said, good night. But he said she was taller than him. And now he was quite tall now. He was about 6 foot. So, whether this was part of the phenomenon or whether there was another potential witness there who, almost saw something amazing, I don't know. But what I can say is that, the pubs used to close the doors. People get last orders at sort of whatever, 11:30. He would have tended to get home for about 12:30, something like that. And this particular night, he didn't get home till about 1:30. So there's a sense of potentially missing time there. And when I asked him, what did you do after it had gone round the corner? Well, he doesn't know. He can't remember getting home or anything that night. So.
And what is that a memory that's kind of haunted him as well? What happened in that hour?
Yeah. And one thing I noticed, there was a patch of dead grass on that mound of earth there. I never took a picture again. I was just getting into this subject. So nowadays I'd have been up there with, like you say, Geiger counters and taking soil samples and looked a lot. But then I didn't. But yeah, I think that was a really important and interesting one. One, the hooded aspect of it. He's not that common, but it is quite common if you dig into the reports. People seeing hooded beings. It's part of the phenomenon. And like my dad saw hooded beings as well. So, and I know Tony Dodd had cases like that, but not that common. And obviously they had no idea about any of this. He didn't even know that's the classic grey. It's just this is what he saw.
I'll make it brief because it's about you, this, but I've got one hooded being story from a family member of my own, one of my daughters, who was engaged to someone who had a farm in Rudston. And she's in this farmhouse, in the bedroom, they're in bed this particular night at farmhouse. There's a wooden chest at the bottom of the bed, And I've been into the bedroom. I looked at the chest and everything, and she woke up in the night. Then boyfriend were asleep, and she said, I looked, and there's a tall being at the bottom of the bed and two small hooded beings. And there's a conical shaped glass on the wooden chest with a green liquid that looked almost luminous. She said, they're pouring into it, or they're pouring something out of it. I can't remember now. I'll have to ask her again. But one of the little beings looked at her. She said, and I kind of froze. She said, and then I put my head under the covers on the side of the bed. And after a while, I looked again, and it was stood at the side of the bed. She couldn't see eyes or anything, but it was stood there. And yeah, that were a really frightening experience for her. And that were in the farmhouse. I better not say it name at farm. I don't seem fair, I don't think. But that's in Rudston anyway. So anybody who sort of knows will be able to work it out. I think I've written about it in book 2. But back to you, that we've got. You said there were a few more things for the Ford family, didn't you? So what's the next one then, Lee?
Well, the other little thing that I find quite intriguing is that, and this does speak to how effective that Mel especially was, but all of them really, is that he actually started filming himself at night. So he bought a video camera, and he did capture UFOs 3 times as well, but they weren't amazing. But I've got those. But he started setting his video camera up, and then every day he'd just go through it. Nothing had happened, you know. And if he felt something had happened, especially. Anyway, this went on for a while and nothing happened. But then one particular night, he felt something had happened. And as he was going through his video, he said it was just him in bed. And then all of a sudden, he was just looking through the actual, it was a camcorder at the time, you know, with the cassette. So he was watching through the viewfinder, which is black and white.
Yeah.
But instead, all of a sudden, the screen just filled up with bubbles. And he said it was like, not like fuzz, but like bubbles on the screen. And when he told me this, I was kicking him almost, because have you still got it? Like, no, I recorded over it next night, you know. And it's like, well, I know it didn't capture what we wanted, but wouldn't it have been great to have that to look at?
He had actually got something, hadn't he? But
yeah,
he were looking for something different, weren't he? You were probably looking for figures or
absolutely.
He caught a phenomena there that were really interesting. And did he film for? I don't mean per night. I mean over a number of years, or what? Just a few months?
For about 6 months or something like that, and I think he just gave it up.
That kind of tells you, though, how much it impacted him, didn't it? You know, would
Absolutely.
you do that if you're fabricating a story? You know, I've got a camera. Sounds terrible, doesn't it? Because Mary, my missus, has got a cloth over it, and that's in bedroom, and she sometimes goes to bed before me, and it's all it's on. But I come to bed, I move it off. I haven't captured anything, but it's there, 24/7 CCTV. Does that make me sad? You know what I mean? But
well, it's worth it, isn't it?
Yeah, but there you go. Okay, then. Just see what, Lee?
Maybe it keeps them away. I always say, you know, if someone doesn't like paranormal phenomenon, get your camera out.
Yeah, well, yeah. We'll just see if Les has got any questions here, because he might have a few more.
Yeah, that's fascinating, guys. And I just see we've got a super chat in from Patricia Adams-Wright. Thank you very much. Yeah, and very much appreciated, Patricia. Thank you very much. Okay, let's have a look. So, we're just going to do a little bit of housekeeping here, Paul, and can you tell everybody where the website is? I know they've got the address on the stream tonight, but I'll just put the new front page up on the website, and if you can tell everybody what they can do on that website.
Anybody who wants to read the book electronically, it's on Amazon, and all the reviews are there. So read the reviews and make your own mind up from there. But they're on the website. They're a lot cheaper than they used to be, because basically I've not got some huge corporation taking between £4 and £5 off me for every book sale. And yeah, truthproof truthproof.co.uk. Send us your reports. Let's keep it rolling, and that's about where I'm at with it. Oh, and the new book, yeah, Truth Proof 4. It will be going to the printers in, I would have thought, I think Don told me today, we've been talking about it 2 weeks' time. So it's Truth Proof 4, Beyond Reasonable Doubt. So the subtitle has changed a few times, guys, but that's what it's stuck on now, and that's where it's staying. Multi-phenomena reports in the book, all new to everybody else's ears, and I've probably talked about a few of them, but they'll be in a lot more detail in the book. So thank you, Les, and thank you for everybody that's helped me and contributed towards it.
Yeah, and I think, Lee, you forwarded me some photographs to show everybody of what you do in your other life. So I will put those on, and if you want to tell everybody what you actually do, yeah, and I'll put them on now.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's just a small company. It's myself and my fiance, Victoria Morris. We do sculpture and murals and fossil reconstructions and all sorts. But I thought your viewers might quite enjoy the sculpture trail we did, which is up near Pendle Hill, because we did mythical creatures. So we've got a unicorn, we did a black dog, a boggart, which has actually been damaged now, to be fair, but and then there was a wood nymph or a dryad as well, and a woodpecker with a fairy. I didn't send you a picture of that. So yeah, that's what I do for a living.
Yeah, and your website is actually incredible-creations.com.
That's right, yep, thank you.
Yeah, which is on the screen now. Okay then, guys, we'll...
Let's just have a couple more questions if Lee wants, because I find it interesting that they're hitting us with different things, because I know what's coming next. We're going to talk about the Todman and calf, but yeah, okay, Les.
Okay then. So it's a question from, let's have a look where Roddy Benz. Lee, do you believe we are close to disclosure? I know we touched on earlier. And if so, how do you think it will affect people? Which is a very good question, actually.
I do, but I've kind of felt this way for years and years now. To be honest, there's always been it's coming now. But I think we really are, especially in America, closer than we've ever been before. And the reason is because of people like Christopher Mellon and Lou Elizondo, who are pushing the buttons right at the top and applying the pressure. And so, we now have America just about to create an official office for the first time in 50 years or whatever it is since the closing of Blue Book. They have the task force operating now, and by all accounts, the Navy pilots are encountering the phenomenon regular way on both coasts. But more than that, there's a story I told you earlier about these people from the Department of Homeland Security looking for hardware. There's a gentleman named Eric Davis, who's a legend. If you don't know his name, look him up, Eric Davis. Dr. Eric Davis, but there's a set of papers have been out for quite a while now, and this is a conversation between Dr. Eric Davis and Admiral. I can't think of his name now, but he was an admiral at the time, and the point was that this guy went to an aerospace company. He was told where to go, and he went to this aerospace company to get access to recovered hardware. We're talking about crashed discs, essentially.
Yeah.
And he was told no. And he was absolutely livid about it. This story was known, but a couple of years ago, the transcript of the conversation of the meeting between the Admiral and Eric Davis became public. And so anyone can read that now. And there's a lot of detail in there. But what's really interesting is that Eric Davis just said no comment. He's the kind of guy that if it's BS, he just says it outright. He just said no comment. Some of the other people involved have denied it, but it actually says within the document that they were going to deny it, And then we've had Elizondo recently say that he believes Roswell 100%. I mean, that's huge. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Who else, Lee, just before we move, who else, like you said, Elizondo, but who else do you think, or have you got any views on who's sitting on truth that could potentially move it forward for everybody?
I think it would have been the Atomic Energy Commission, wouldn't it, and the Department of Energy. But the information we have now is that it's likely Lockheed, actually.
Okay.
Lockheed Martin.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Les?
Yeah, one more question for this session. Let's have a look. Rolf Winter, Lee, have
Ralph?
you had any encounters with Men in Black?
Not yet. Not until after tonight. No, and I've not come across that personally either in my research. Local research.
Yeah.
No, no.
Okay, short and sweet answer there, and thanks for the questions so far. A few more questions for later on, guys, but I'll let you run with the show.
Okay. Well, if you're happy, we'll move on to the work that you've done on the Todmorden calf.
Yeah, yeah,
Obviously, give people a brief outline of what we're talking about. After they'll
yeah.
know it's calf, but yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the first I heard about this, it came from Deborah Hatswell. So credit to Deborah for that, and thanks to her as well, because as soon as I saw those pictures, I knew what I was looking at, because I've seen so many similar pictures over the years, and the fact that it was in Todmorden, I thought I've got to go and have whatever. I've got to find out as much as I can about this. So I reached out to Deborah straight away, and she got back to me and put me in touch with Albert Tyas. Now Albert was the guy that found the calf. And he found it. I forgot the date actually, but it was last year. It was July, June, I think, something like that. And he was just going for a walk around Gaddings Dam in Todmorden with his girlfriend. But for anyone knows the area, it was the lower side. So if you're heading up there, it's a circular walk. It was down on the lower side. And he saw what he thought was a Labrador, actually, golden retriever, because of the colour of it. I think it's probably a Jersey calf in the end, but because it was such a small young calf, he actually thought it was a dog. But he'd had an interest in this subject himself, and so he went to have a look. The closer he got, he was wondering what he was looking at, and then when he got there, he realised, and because of that, he took 8 really good pictures, close-ups of the head and the back end and all that lot. So what we're looking at is a dead calf, which ordinarily is not unusual, except in this instance it had what to me are very classic injuries, and be familiar to you as well, Paul.
Yeah.
So the first one was the ear was removed right to the skull, and not a speck of blood there at all. The second one was what we would call a classic jaw strip, because it's so common. So
Yeah.
all of the flesh is stripped right down to the bone. The whole bone is visible. And again, I'd say no blood, but there was a little bit of blood seepage underneath the area. And from looking at the photographs closely, I think we can safely say the tongue was missing, as you can see right into the other side of the mouth. The tail was missing, absent missing. There was what they call a rectal core, but the back end was all cored out. And again, there was some clean bone visible in there. And that was it. So the genitals often are removed. In this case, they weren't. So this is classic sort of animal mutilation stuff. And I think from looking at the pictures, when Albert had found it, it was very fresh. I think he found it I think it was a Sunday morning, late morning, 10 o'clock or something. But there was wet red blood, close to the animal. So I think it must have happened the previous night.
Yeah.
Even early hours of the morning, I would say. I mean, it's a speculation, but that's what I would say. No UFO reports directly associated, because I did ask. This is quite close to the Shepherd's Rest Inn, so if anybody knows that, I did ask them, and they didn't have any reports at that time anyway. But yeah, so I was able to meet with Albert. It was 2 weeks after the fact. We went up there and we did everything we could essentially, but it was a little bit too late. Predators had started, the foxes had started at it and things, so it was a bit too late to take any flesh samples or anything. We did take soil samples from directly under where the animal was and a distance away, so a control sample. We checked the electromagnetic spectrum, and we had a magnet, a high-powered magnet, which we just dragged around the area just in case there's any unusual metallic particles, just anything really. Just looking for anything. Took a lot of pictures, and we also looked for the ear and the tail and the missing parts, and we never did find them. But yeah, that was Tom and Calf in a nutshell, really.
And were there any more carcasses found after or before? Did you find anything out?
No, but I did find, because Deborah also put me in touch with David Caton, who's one of the well-known UK animal mutilation researchers, and he told me that, yeah, he'd been up there in 2002. I mean, literally, more or less the same place, and actually, we're pretty certain it's the same farmer now.
Yeah.
And he'd had a sheep. It wasn't him, but it was in his farmyard. A sheep had been mutilated in 2002.
Because it's open grazing up there, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's mixed grazing, so that was a point. So in the picture you can see, or in the pictures you'll see sheep. There was no cows around, but when I went up there a second time, a little bit later on, we did find a herd of cows in the same field. They were just up on the top near the reservoir, so they probably were in the field at the time. You know.
Out of interest, then, Lee, the herd of cows that you saw, were they Jersey cows or?
They were mixed, but they were Jerseys, and they were calves of a little bit older now, but definitely of the similar age to the one that got killed. Yeah.
Because I remember when you were looking into this, I did tell you that, I don't know, Les might be able to tell me how far away Ticton is from where we are in Bridlington, but it's not that far. We're only looking at a 20-minute run towards Hull, and there were cattle mutilations occurring at Ticton at the same time. Can you remember me telling you?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I didn't never got any details though. Did you?
No, I didn't get very far with it, but I do know, strangely enough, that the deer carcass we've just been talking about were at the same time as well.
Okay.
Which is an interesting one. And the thing with me is, Lee, I'm that kind of wrapped up in my own thing. You know, and I look at things, and I don't want to invest too much time in other people's research, because same with books. I just don't really read that much. Do you know what I mean? And it's not that this research on the calf isn't good and valid, because it's absolutely amazing. But you can only be in one place at one time, can't you? You know. So I remember you looking at this extensively. So,
well, do you know, I'll just say, as you reminded me there, that I was doing just research at the time, and I was looking, and I think this is a goldmine for anyone that wants to dig into this subject at all. Local media reports, not the national stuff. And I found three cases, potential cases of other mutilations that same year, 2020, and very much in the same area. One of them was a sheep, a prize. I think it's a lank sheep or something like that had been beheaded, and the head had gone, but the ear with the tag was left behind, and the ear was clean and bloodless. Another was a lamb. The farmer had it in the pictures in the newspaper, and he was just basically showing you inside the carcass, but there wasn't a drop of blood on the fleece or anything. So again, it looked to me like possibly the same thing. Deborah Hatswell had a report from Healy Dell, is it? The nature reserve in Rochester.
Okay.
And there were one other, excuse me. But also, I don't know how many people know this, but that same year, there was a raft of horse mutilations in France. There was hundreds of them. And unfortunately, we just don't know the details. So, you know, was it the correct guy?
And I wonder, like, if people concentrated on the horse mutilations, whether they'd find that in not just France, but other countries, not necessarily UK, there's horses were being mutilated same month. I've not been saying same day, but do you know 2011, which you might have read about when I looked into the wallaby decapitations at Sowerby Zoo, just outside of Bridlington. It said one wallaby. It turned out all 6 wallabies had been decapitated.
Okay.
You know, but then when you looked into it further, all over the UK, Hanwell Bunny Park, in the Cotswolds, private collections of wallabies, having the wallabies decapitated.
Really?
And then if you go further afield, on the Emerald Coast in Australia and the Coffs Coast, wallabies decapitated. You know, all we're doing is highlighting it. We are connecting dots, but we're not solving anything, are we? We know something's happening, but you know, we can't quite prove it. I mean, or prove what is happening, because in the majority of the ones in the UK, foxes were blamed. In the majority of the ones in Australia, all happening in the same couple of months as well, foxes were blamed. And the sarcasm in some of the papers overseas were saying, well, they must be looking for a fox with a samurai sword because it's a clean cut.
Yeah.
And it sounds a bit macabre, people, but these things are happening. It's worth knowing that these things are happening and with a lot more mystery and intrigue than people first give them credit for. This report appeared in local paper, and it just said wallaby decapitated. When I went to speak to the zookeeper, they had them all done, And then, as I said, you look further, there's a lot more. I don't know whether you have any more to add on that, because I think you've done something on the arbor porpoises as well, did you?
No, it was just a research paper I came across. But no, I have a little bit more to add on the Todd Calf, actually.
Yeah, please do.
We went back up there about 2 or 3 times afterwards. And the second time we went, my partner, Vicky, she's really good at nature and she's got a really keen eye. And we were just looking around the site and she'd spotted a portion of the skull it was. Bearing in mind foxes we were assuming foxes, badgers, whatever, but I think it was probably
predated on it, yeah.
Predated on it. But it was a portion of skull which was now clean. But no, she just noticed it, and she's not squeamish, so she picked it up and she said, well, that's unusual. And I've still got it. We brought it back. It's got a very unusual pair of scratches. They're only about 15 mil. They're parallel to each other, about 5 mil apart. And they run slightly apart as well. So, whatever did it wasn't a fixed implement, if you see what I mean.
Not two canines or...
Yeah, they sort of come apart. But that was my thought. But the thing is, they're very fine. They're too fine for a tooth, I would say, or at least if it is, it would have to be a very, very fine tooth thing. I don't know how fine a badger's tooth is, to be fair. But anyway, to go into it a little bit further, these 2 scratches, they're at an angle, and they're quite deep into the skull itself. And what I found is that at the tip of each one of these scratches, so 4, there are holes, almost like pinprick holes. And I mean, to tell you how fine they were, I tried to pass a human hair through, because at one point I thought it went right through into the skull cavity, but it didn't actually. It dead ended. But and these are much deeper than the scratches themselves. So I've got microscopic images of those.
I was just going to say, have you looked under a microscope or
yeah,
something?
They look really strange. They look almost drilled, in a way. But I'm not going to say they are.
It might be worth letting somebody look at that to see, with more specialist equipment, to see if anything like of a precision instrument has made them holes.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of the reasons I mentioned it. So, I mean, I've got that here, and if anybody, is expert, has any expertise in that area or thinks they can help, please do get in touch. The other thing is we also retrieved the jaw, because I was particularly interested in that, because in the original photographs, you can see it's the left jaw, and you can see where the skin has been removed across it, and then it's been cut clean, stripped clean away.
Okay.
Which is typical, but highly unusual. I mean, researchers say that it usually takes steam, heated steam in an abattoir to strip meat off a bone like that. So I was interested to see, are there any cuts or scratches, on the jaw, and there aren't,
Yeah, it is interesting that you didn't find sinew and strands of flesh. That it's clean off. Les, well, before we move on, Lee, let's just see whether Les has got else to ask us.
Yes. Well, we've just recently been on the subject. I've got a question further down the list. It's from Tim Brennan.
Hi, Tim.
Yeah, welcome to the show. He's saying, thanks, Lee. Todmorden has a history of phenomena. Can you tell us a little bit more about them?
I mean, I can if you want. It's quite well known, isn't it? It's obviously the Alan Godfrey case is probably one of the better known ones. We can come to this later on if you like, but I had a case. Oh, battery's running low. Yeah, just give us a second to mess with this.
Yeah, we've got a little tech. Yeah, we've got a little tech problem, guys. Lee will be back with us in a minute. I think his battery's dying. Are you back on, Lee? Are you back on? Okay. All right. Yeah, well, we all have these problems, right? We're back.
Examples of other phenomena.
Oh, from Tom Madden. Yeah,
Yes,
well, what I
please.
was going to say, so earlier this year, I investigated a UFO sighting in Tom Madden. I mean, I don't know if you want to go into that now or come back to it later. But
it's entirely up to you. Is there something that we need to talk about before we wind down? Because if
well,
there
there's
is,
a little bit of stuff on the mutilation I'd like to come back to actually before we leave that alone.
well, let's stay
but
with
I'll just say, this report that I have. Sorry, Paul.
No, I say let's stay with the animal mutilation, then we'll move to Tim's question and try and answer that.
All right. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. But I've lost my thread a little bit there.
Right.
But, anyway, so I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll show you this because this to me is quite impressive. Bloodless cuts. You know, for people that aren't aware of this subject.
Yeah.
I mean, then look at that. You know, this is one book. There's not many books on it, but this covers a period from 78 to 92, and there are thousands of cases, and they're very classic. What we see all the time. Now, going back to the Todd calf, I did find a case in Oregon at the same time, which was more or less identical. So, you know, it is going on. And also the National Institute for Discovery Science, I just want to point this out, that when they were investigating that phenomenon, they were using veterinarians and trackers and experts, and they were finding organs removed from inside animals without any incisions, you know, for example, and they were finding damaged hearts within an intact sacks, you know, highly, highly strange and unexplainable stuff. And that's really all I wanted to say, I think.
Okay. Right. We haven't got to Tim's question, so I do apologise, Tim. Let's just ask Les to cover something else just for a moment.
Yeah, I just want to ask the question, Lee. Is that book still in print? Can it still be bought?
Yeah, you sort of have to order it. You can order it and they'll print it for you. That is how it works. But it's well worth getting. So.
Yeah. Okay then. I'll just move on to another question then. And let's have a look. Well, we've got a question. Pendle Hill UFOs. Talk about Ian's case, Lee. And I don't know who that's from, actually.
Ian Gibbons, are we talking about here?
Yeah, that'll be Andrew, won't it? Hi, Andrew.
Oh, okay. Okay, do you want to
do that?
We'll do that later.
Do you want to?
Yeah, let's do it. Yep, please do.
Ian Gibbons.
Okay. I am a little bit concerned here because what I've got is a dodgy charging cable, and the battery's a bit low. But I'll just keep tweaking it.
Okay,
right.
We'll go to the very end, Lee.
Yeah, if I happen to drop off, just recall and I'll be on my phone instead. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. All good.
Okay. Yeah, Ian Gibbons. So this is something that happened on the 22nd of February this year in Com. And I actually saw it in the newspaper. It was in the Lancashire Telegraph, but it took me a couple of weeks, but I thought I've got to find out more about this. So I spoke to the guy on the phone, and actually it was Andrew who asked the question there, who put me in touch with Ian. So thank you, Andrew, for that. I really appreciate that. So anyway, Ian, it was 6:30 on the 22nd of February, and he lives in Colne, just on the outskirts of town, and he's got a nice view of hills, and he has a patio window, and he just sort of wandered through his patio window and he's having a look out, and in Ian's words, what he saw was a distortion in the sky, and he said it was almost like a spiraling aura. We asked a lot of questions about this, and there wasn't any color or anything, but he could just see this distortion. He said it was next to Venus, but we've actually determined that it was Sirius. It was actually Sirius, but it doesn't take away from his account at all. So he's looking at this distortion and thinking, what's that? And then, in his own words, an orange object came through. So it came through this distortion. And what I find absolutely fascinating about this is that he said this object came through and it looked, it wasn't perfectly circular. So if you can imagine something, in fact, if you can imagine something like this coming through at this kind of an angle. So it was more oval. And it hovered there for a moment, and he's thinking, what the hell is that? And then he said it strained itself up, and what he meant by that is it rotated in midair until it was flat towards him. It was perfectly circular. At that point, he called his wife to come and have a look, and he went to get his binoculars. Now, I've also spoken to his wife on the phone as well, because I nearly missed this, and she said that while she was looking at it, and I think I did send you some sketches of this as well, Les. She saw a series of red lights equal all the way around what is the bottom, as we will discover, this object. Ian didn't see that. But anyway, he came back and saw this object is come through, it's turned like this in midair, and then they both saw it shoot up high into the sky. And then from Ian's point of view, what happened is, it rotated onto its side, and then it shot off. And it shot off twice as fast as a plane, he said. No, that's quite some speed. And again, no sound to any of this. This object was orange. It was a reddish orange colour, and it was quite a size. It was much bigger than the star. And you know, we're speculating here, but this sounds very much like the types of thing that have happened on the Skinwalker Ranch, and the types of thing that people like Eric Davis are writing about and speculating about, which is traversable wormholes. You know, or a portal, or you know, and I mean, this case quietly caught the attention of a lot of high-level researchers. I know the Scientific Coalition for UFO Studies were involved, and the director there, Robert Powell, spoke with Ian directly a few times. And I spoke to one of the other guys. I was dealing with him as well. So I was fortunate enough to go out and record a video interview with Ian. And this is all available in an article that I put together. So if people want to watch the interview, they can see Ian's sketches and all that lot as well.
Where can they look at this, Lee?
I have just a little platform, if you will, on Medium. So it's anomalous-I. So anomalous-I on medium.com. If you Google that, you should find it.
Yeah. And I think that's the end of Lee for now, people. And have you froze as well, Les? Well, I think Lee will be back to us, Les. But in the meantime, you just have to put up with me for 2 minutes. And if not, I think we've all enjoyed listening to Lee. For those who want to know a little bit about what's happening up around the eastern North Yorkshire coast, I'm out quite regular. Even last night when we'd got lots of heavy rain and bad weather, I were up there with Steve Ashbridge. God knows why. We must want his heads checking, but we were there. But the spheres of light, the orange spheres, were seen again on October the 2nd by rock anglers up at Benton. And yesterday in Scarborough, we've got Lee back now, so I'll shut up in a minute. Yesterday in Scarborough, during the rain, someone reported seeing a square of light, white light open up in a cloud. It appeared on social media as well, Lee. And then just an explosion of white light, and it disappeared in the daytime, that I might add. But Scarborough, 20 miles away from where I am now. So good to have you back, Lee. Didn't know what to say then, mate. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No worries. It's all good. We'll just...
yeah, I am. How was that? Yeah,
well, we're just about there. I don't know where you want to go with it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we're getting intermittent
yeah,
audio.
we covered the ends a little bit, didn't we?
Yeah, well, I think we're getting a bit of intermittent audio there, but...
Okay. It might be a signal issue, that. We'll see
That's
if
a bit better.
improves. How's that now?
That's better. Yep.
Yeah.
So if you want to just
Okay.
continue with the Ian Gibbons portal.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, that was an amazing event. I really think that was an important sighting that happened there. And I say a lot of other researchers quietly were interested in investigating as well. So yeah, but I mean, we went up there, we filmed him, we went out to the field where the object were, and we did the tests and things. We didn't detect anything, really.
No.
And as an aside, only recently, a few weeks ago, Ian told me that his sister had seen something very similar, very close
Really?
by. And I know this is an experience you've had, Paul. Uh, he said, yes, you know, I'll get in touch with you and I'll get you all the information. So I was really looking for this message was, oh no, she doesn't want to talk
It's
at all, and I haven't
it's
heard anything.
absolutely deflating, isn't it? You know, when you know that there's some
Yeah,
vital information out there and you don't get it, jump into Wilsthorpe. I know there's another witness who filed a report to
right.
the police that night, and it's gone to Coast Guard. It's now in protected archive. Thanks to a lady called Carly who saw the UFO whilst travelling back, a huge UFO, and told me about it. But we know there's another witness who stopped his car to look at it. Well, all we know is it's a red saloon car because she thought he was drunk because he's weaving all over the road. And then she realized when they turned to there, right, this was a UFO. So it is frustrating, isn't it, that Lee, when you know that the information is there. What would you say to anybody that's sitting on information? What would you, as an appeal for them to give it up?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because to be honest, when I spoke to Ian and when I spoke to Ian's wife, this is Ian Gibbons' wife, she was very reluctant as well, and she'd made an effort to sort of tell me this extra detail on Ian's behalf, really. But and the reason was because he again he was compelled to tell the story, so he'd gone to the paper, and then he was getting a lot of horrible comments and things on Facebook. I might have seen it myself. You know, you do an appeal for witnesses on a non-interested group, you know, on a general group, and you get all the idiots come and make comments. There's a lot of stigma there, so I do understand it. But I think the stigma's going, you know, and it's certainly going in the States. And I mean, the only way to break the stigma is to talk about it, isn't it? You know.
Without a doubt, and you've done it, and I've done it. We've put some things on Facebook and social media. I've asked for information about Hunmanby. Anybody knows anything about the events of Hunmanby 1998, and for every one gem, you get 20 not so favourable comments, don't you? But that's just the way of things, isn't it? You know, there's nothing we can do about it. So, is there any more to the Ian Gibbons portal, or have you covered it?
I think that's pretty much it, actually. It was just a one-off sighting, nothing else after or before, but such a dramatic event, you know, this portal aspect of it, which is not common, but it is there. And I think what's important about something like that is for people that are looking for explanations and people that are, you know, wondering, is this our technology? You know, well, we're certainly a long way away from traversable wormholes. You know, I mean,
you know what you've just spoke about there, Lee. I mean, I don't know if it's anything close to that, but about 2 weeks ago, myself and Les filmed Lee Haywood on the cliff tops, telling us about a sighting that myself and Lee had. I just wanted Lee to tell it because it's I think it's better than me just reciting stories all the time, you know. But what we saw that day, I've never seen anything as close on those cliff tops as what that was. And Les has been doing some reconstructions and some animation. And it makes you wonder if it were that kind of thing we saw, because we both watched it implode. I mean, in Lee's words, it were about as big as a Volkswagen Beetle and 100 yards away from us. But it imploded. It literally closed in on itself, and it were like lava, like molten lava, all just swirling. Incredible sighting, but still no closer to answers, are we? So, unless we've got more questions, Les, we can move on.
Yes, I think I've got a couple more. And
Okay. Are you happy with the questions, Lee?
Yes. Space Cadet Lottie is asking, has Lee ever seen like a camera flash whiteout that fills the whole environment? You know, like what we was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I haven't. No, I know you have, Paul, and I did.
Yeah,
talking about the appeals, I did an appeal. I think it was just last year, maybe earlier this year, just on the Barn Olswick Talk Facebook page. And I got about 11 reports back from that one, and one of them, it was actually eerie, but it was that kind of thing. Yeah, a guy had seen a flash. It was so bright it blinded him a little bit.
Yeah,
but that's the only one I have.
Well, the Hunmanby guys, all three of them reported driving home from Hunmanby in the early hours and seeing flashes of light that just lit night to day. You know, on several occasions. And we've got a guy, after I'd spoke to Howard Hughes, he contacted Howard, and then I were able to connect with him, and he'd had him and two friends walking the cliff tops in December 17th, I think it was 2018. Flash of white light walking back towards the car park at the RSPB, and literally night today, and thought, oh, that's odd. Is the storm out at sea? You know, looking for rational. But when they got to the car, there's an hour and a half of missing time. It's interesting, isn't it? You know, Les, go on.
Yeah, Patricia Adams, right?
Hi, Patricia.
Yeah, welcome to the show, Patricia. If you're still with us.
Well, she's one of our staunched viewers, and thank you for your support.
Yeah. Do you really think the general public are ready for full disclosure? Now, I know we talked about this earlier, so I've got to say, Patricia, you might have to just rewind a little bit in the show, but if you just want to mention anything now, Lee.
I do, you know, I do. I honestly think most people, they're not that interested. They'll absorb it and they'll move on. I think it's only that, I mean, for me anyway, that's kind of where it starts, you know, and then I want to know the details of what it's all about, you know. But I think a lot of people would just absorb it into their life and move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. And well, that's the Tim Brennan one. Jill Weeks wants to know what the beetle is behind Lee on the wall. Now, that's a question we've all been wanting to ask.
Is it a Goliath beetle?
Rhinoceros.
Rhinoceros.
That's my partner. She was an art student, so, you know, but she's got quite a fascination with insects as well. And that was one of the studies that she
Oh, God, can you imagine coming across that, running across your car?
No, I think they fly.
Yeah. I got a great question from Joe Weeks, and this is a great question, actually. For what reason do you think they may be mutilating?
Well, it's always a good question, isn't it? And it's what we don't really have the answer, do we? But I've observed some things, and a few researchers have noticed some things. So the animals that mostly get mutilated are horses and cattle, and in this country, sheep. Sometimes deer, and sometimes the smaller animals, as we've said. But it seems to be mostly grazing animals. You know, so they're feeding on the grass. So theoretically, if somebody wanted to do some kind of environmental study, you know, if they were tracking a pollutant in the environment or something like that, then to take soft tissue, you know, and blood and internal organs and things from, and tongue especially, you know, from grazing animals is one place where you're going to find something like that. So it makes me wonder if somebody or something is not engaged in some kind of environmental monitoring.
Yeah, some kind of research into, like you said, what's building up in the nutrients that these things are eating. And once again, arbor porpoises, all the trauma that we were finding on them were around the jaw, and what would be the tongue area. So it could be finding out what the marine life is consuming and what affects it, our pollutants or anything. I know we've no idea why they're doing these things, but you make a good point about it being herbivores. It weren't all us herbivores up around East and North Yorkshire. We've got foxes and badgers, but they're the badgers are omnivorous, isn't it? But
there's definitely exceptions to the rule, but it is for the most part. It is, herbivores. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, I've got a question from Jane Louise Bowery, and Bowery. I probably pronounce it wrong every week. I mention Jane's name. Yeah. Lee, what's the scariest experience you've had? So that'll be touching on your early experiences, Lee.
Well, I mean, I haven't had many experiences. I have experienced sleep paralysis several times, to be honest with you, but I've never seen anything. You know, so to me, that's where I'll leave it as a sleep paralysis experience, just because I've never seen anything. But I have been quite terrified when it's happened, I must admit. So that's probably up there. And funnily enough, another one kind of relates to the Mel Ford story, but it's just an amusing anecdote, really. Because we used to go around there quite a lot, me and a partner or a friend or whatever, and we'd often stay till gone 12 o'clock before we got out. And you sort of become a little bit immune to this subject. You know, you spend a lot of time reading about it. It's not fearful, it's exciting and interesting. I'm sure you know some people will agree. So I felt as though I wouldn't be scared if I saw and experienced something this particular night. And we came out and we thought we'd have a walk up the lane, which is pitch black. I mean, we walk it regular way, but it's pitch black. We'd have a walk up the lane for a change. So we did. And we heard this sound, and it was a boom, 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 boom. Coming out of the blackness, like my heart started beating. So I thought, okay, I would be scared. It was a horse. It was just a horse. But then I realised, all right, I would be scared, you know.
I don't suppose none of us know until we're in that situation, do we? You know, it's only like filming these things. You know, why didn't you get a picture? You know, like jumping straight back to Chris Turner, Jerry Denning and myself and Mark Farnell on the cliff tops that night when there were all that activity. These are guys used to using cameras. And that's no disrespect to them, but it's that caught in the headlights moment when something's happening that's just so different. Last thing on your mind is, let me just reach in my bag and get my camera. I take them up with me all the time, but you know, it's difficult, isn't it? But you always get a person who knows, why didn't you get a camera? Everybody's got a phone, you know.
I know. It was typical with Ian Gibbons' sighting. You know, he went to get his binoculars and he got a close look at it. But they all both had phone cameras. You know, they could have got some pictures. They never did.
Yeah.
It's one of them, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. Yeah, we'll just go back to Les and see what we've got.
That's all I've got on my questions list for now, guys.
Yeah.
Well, I will add something actually to the Ian Gibbons story, which I'd forgotten about. It's not particularly what happened to Ian, because Ian had his experience at 6:30. It was on the 22nd of February. And now that night, me and my partner, Vicky, we often go out for night walks, and we're always sky watching and things like that, you know, of an evening. And we were thinking about going for a walk that night. And I remember I went out for a cigarette, and it was about 9:30. And I saw right on the distance, quite low on the horizon, just a light, like an aeroplane, or, you know, I assumed it was an aeroplane. It probably was. But it seemed to be a pulsing light rather than a flash. And it just piqued my interest. And I thought, oh, maybe we will go out for a walk tonight. Anyway, we didn't. We ended up watching something, and I think I fell asleep. But about 12:30, I went back out, have another cigarette before I go to bed, you know. So I went back outside, and I saw what I took to be potentially the same thing. It was a pulsing light. It was white and it was bright, but it was pulsing up and down rather than a flash, and it didn't seem like strobe lights. But that caught my attention, and I thought it was really interesting. I actually had a bag of rubbish, so I thought I'll just go and put that away and I'll come back and look at this. So it was moving from my left to right when I saw it. So I went back, I put the rubbish in seconds, I was back again, and now it's moving from my right to left. So this object has changed directions 180 degrees, and by the way, it was silent. And at 12:30 in Barnoldswick, you know, you can hear a car the other end of town. You know what it's same in Bridlington, isn't it? And so I was really interested at this point, and I watched it, and I took pictures. I actually took motion pictures, so I got about 6 motion pictures as it's moving along, and I lost it behind the houses. It's just over there, and then literally a couple of seconds later, it was coming back the other way. And I watched it and I tracked it, and it went all the way over to Colne, essentially. It went right back to where Ian Gibbons was, essentially. Now, interestingly, his object came my way. And now, I'm not saying they're the same thing, because they weren't. What I saw was very different. But the only thing I could explain that as is a drone, you know.
Yeah.
It could have been quite a good quality, expensive drone. Somebody would having to be using the goggles, because they were flying it from the other, you know, they weren't flying it within this town. They wouldn't have had line of sight on it. In
which case then, Lee, do you think there's any chance that Ian Gibbons was mistaken and he's been looking at a drone with multicoloured lights on it?
I don't really, because if you listen to his account and the details of it, it just doesn't fit. You know, it was much too big to be a drone. There was this distortion in the sky. There was this revolving in the sky. I don't know how many people have seen the gimbal video. You know, the one released where it rotates on the video. Yeah. And this is something that commercial, you know, any of our aircraft you just can't do that.
No.
So Ian observed this effect twice, and when it flew away, I think I might have missed this fact, by the way. When it flew away, it looked like he said a flying saucer. That's what he saw. And it's in the drawing, isn't it? It was a classic disc with a dome on top. And it took off from a standstill, twice as fast as a plane. I mean, there's no drones.
Yeah, well, you know, that weren't thrown in just to disrespect
No,
his sighting, but you mentioned the drone, so you know
No, you're right.
we're going to get somebody in questions or in comments afterwards saying, "Oh, you know, you've already explained it. He's seen a drone, hasn't he?" You know, but
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. We have to consider all these options. It's important. But I would say though that what I saw could have been a drone, but it was 6 hours later as well. It wasn't. It was 12:30, and he saw his at 6:30.
yeah, it's a big
So
difference.
most drones, the batteries are gone, and we're in an hour, aren't they? And that's that.
So we're just about winding up here, and is there anything else you want to talk about? Last 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'd like to tell you about the Gaddings Dam report from earlier this year.
Please do, yeah.
So this one again, it was on Facebook, and I just thought, well, that's interesting because this woman, she said, "Has anyone seen this bright flashing light over near Gaddings Dam?" And to me, Gaddings Dam, well, that's where the Tommen Calf was. So I got in touch with her, and she was very helpful. She was, happy to answer all my questions, and she even sent me a video of the area describing what she saw. But she didn't want to be interviewed, and she didn't want a name used, so we haven't used a name or anything like that. But essentially what she saw was very unusual. It was really interesting. She saw something she described as like a plasma ball. Okay, but I really had to drill down on the questions to get the details of this clear. Well, she said it looked like a plasma ball, but without the outer spherical aspect of it, and without the inner circular core of it. As she described it, it was just the crackling arms, is how she said. The lightning, if you will. 5 of them.
Have you put the pictures up of this, Les?
There is a reconstruction we did of that, yeah. Okay. And yeah, so it was orange in colour. That was the colour. And what really got me, and I didn't pick this up at first, it took me 2 or 3 sessions of questioning, if you will, to get to this bottom of this question. It didn't move or change. You imagine a plasma ball or something to be doing all this, but it didn't. It was the same the whole time. But it moved. It took 8 to 9 minutes, she said. And it flew from where the windmills are, Tommen, following the brow of the hill. So it was adjusting its altitude, to follow the contours of the hill. And then it reached a point where it had gone right over Gaddings Dam. It was a little bit further. And then it began to ascend, but it did it in a zigzag manner, she said. So like this, up slowly. And I said, do you think it could have been a spiral flight path? And she said, no. She said it was very controlled and deliberate and, very definitely a zigzag. And then it ascended to a point where it had gone into the clouds. And I asked her, and she said, yes, you could still see it through the clouds. But then all of a sudden, it's very similar to what I saw at Benton, a flash of orange light, the same colour as this object, and it was gone. And as she said it, after that, nothing. No bits falling down, like an airplane's exploded or something. No, nothing. And the whole experience was silent. They opened the window to check. There was no other sounds associated with that. So again, I don't have an easy explanation for something like that.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, first thing I picked up on is it's following contours at land, so it's controlled, isn't it? It's not, if it was something random, it'd have just ran into hillside, wouldn't it? Or flew into the hillside, should I say? So that's interesting, and the zigzagging's strange. I mean, I got a report from Staxton years ago. I think they call him Dave Hartley, the guy who told me his property was close to a quarry. It's been filled in now, he tells me, but him and his son observed a UFO. That's a pretty close quarters with 2 lights on it, but they could see enough that this object. But as it flew away, something started spinning on it, and it looked like it was zigzagging. But he clearly knew it wasn't. But because these lights were moving in such a configuration, anybody looking at it would have said there's an object zigzagging through. Okay. So, and I always thought that was interesting, in itself. I'm not saying that's what that was doing, but the zigzagging motion. This particular object wasn't flying in a zigzag. It was the lights that were making it look like it was zigzagging.
Yeah, interesting. I've a couple probably of reports from Barnoldswick again, different witnesses seeing shiny objects zigzagging through the sky. Yeah. It's an interesting thing. There was a little bit more to that one, in that the area obviously is significant, as it's where the Todman and Calf was seen, and we didn't have any UFO sightings at that time, but here was one. Now I got contacted by I contacted another person. I think it was a comment actually on the post of the article, who said that her mother had seen objects in that same area, and so had she. And there was another comment as well. Somebody else had seen objects, and this is all Todman. So going back to Tim Brown's question there,
this is a rich area.
And in fact, there was a comment, and it's on the Todman page, and there was a post there of another sighting that it reminds me now. It is in my article as well. I quoted it. It was from 1933, I think.
Really?
And it was an object that flew sort of across Garrings Dam to Studley Pike, and then sort of disappeared there. So yeah,
nothing's changed throughout the years. Do you know, Lee? It's this 2 hours has absolutely flown, and I don't know about the people who've been sat watching and listening in the chat, but for one, I've really enjoyed it as much as anybody I've spoken to. It's been great listening to you, Lee, and I don't know whether Les has got anything to add.
Fantastic as always, Paul. And I got to say, Paul, you're bringing some great guests, and Lee is in the top drawer category. I got to say,
research is brilliant. I'm sure anybody looking at the link that you've provided tonight will see depth of research that you put into this, and it's as good as anybody's. Thank you, Lee.
I'll do a little plug, because I'm not selling anything. I don't have anything to sell. But if anyone wants any more information about the stuff I'm talking about, I have a Facebook page. It's just called UFOs over Pendle. I only post once a week or something like that. It's local reports, but I also cover the news as well. If there's something interesting that's caught my attention, I'll post it on there. And another one is the Anomalous Eye on Medium. There's about 7 or 8 articles on there, and there'll be more to come. And then there is a YouTube page as well, channel, but it's just to support the articles, really. So Ian Gibbons' interviews on there, and the Garrings Dam description is on there as well.
Okay,
Thank
and
you very much, Lee.
if you send me the links through the messenger, Lee, I can put them in the post show notes, and everybody can read them on the description then.
Thank you, Les.
Right, okay, so I've got to thank you guys now at this moment, and thank you again for a great show. And it just remains for me to sign off and thank everybody for coming on tonight's show. So, well then, guys, that was a great show. You must agree. And Lee has got a vast amounts of research under his belt by the sound of it. And what Lee brings out in the future, I'm sure it'll be amazing stuff. So, on that note, I've got to thank everybody who's donated on the super chat tonight. That's really, really welcome. That helps keeps us going and everything, and I don't know, might get us a couple of drinks at Christmas. I don't know, but the way prices are going, it might not. So it remains for me also to thank Deborah Singleton, who does an amazing job week in, week out, trying to control all your riffraff. Now, seriously, you've been a great audience, and it's been great having you on the chat tonight. Some great questions in. Yeah, so there we go. Another great show, hopefully next week. So stay with us. But for now, we are out.